Sarah Okafor had rehearsed her opening line 43 times. She stood in the preparation alcove behind the council chamber's main floor, a narrow space carved from pale Thessian marble, and she whispered the words to herself while her reflection stared back from the polished wall. Distinguished delegates, humanity requests a speaking slot on the matter of the Viridian Corridor transit fees. Simple. Clean. Respectful. She had practiced the bow that came before the words. She had practiced the small, warm smile that came after. She had practiced keeping her hands clasped at her waist so they would not tremble. She was 26 years old. She had been a junior attaché in the human delegation for 3 years, and in those 3 years she had fetched coffee, carried briefing folders, smiled at delegates who did not know her name, and stood in the back of the chamber while older humans spoke in careful, measured tones about trade routes and mining rights. She had never addressed the council. No one her age had. But Ambassador Vasquez had looked at her that morning over a cup of terrible station coffee and said, "You know the Viridian file better than anyone. You go up there. You say the words. You bow. You come back." And Sarah had said, "Yes, ma'am," because that was what you said, and because Sarah Okafor had been raised in Lagos by a grandmother who believed that politeness was a form of armor, and that you wore it even when no one was watching, especially then. She checked her uniform. Navy blue. Pressed. The small silver pin of the human delegation on her left breast. She touched it once, a habit, a small prayer to no god in particular, and then she walked out of the alcove and into the chamber. The Galactic Council chamber was a vast, circular room built into the hollow core of a dead moon. 912 species held seats arranged in rising tiers that climbed toward a domed ceiling painted with the star charts of every member world. The floor at the center was a broad disk of black stone, and at its edge stood a single podium carved from a single piece of Velnari ironwood. The podium was old. Older than the council. Older than most of the species sitting in the tiers. It was where you went when you had something to say to everyone at once. Sarah walked toward it. Her shoes made soft sounds on the stone. The chamber was not quiet. It was never quiet. 900 species murmured and clicked and hummed and rustled in their seats. The Drathan delegation was arguing among themselves in low, grinding vocalizations. The Thessian representatives floated in their liquid-filled pods, exchanging chemical signals that smelled faintly of cinnamon. The Velnari sat in their usual rigid rows, spines straight, watching everything with flat, patient eyes. No one looked at Sarah. This was normal. Humanity's delegation sat in the junior section, Tier 47, near the back. They had been there for 40 years. 40 years of sitting near the back. 40 years of, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, and, we respectfully request, and, thank you for your time and consideration. 40 years of bringing baked goods to committee meetings and laughing at jokes that were not funny and yielding the floor when someone bigger wanted to talk. Sarah reached the podium. She placed her hands on its edges. The ironwood was warm. She looked up at the tiers, at the sea of faces and faces and faces, and she felt very small, and she thought of her grandmother, and she smiled. "Distinguished delegates," she said. Her voice was steady. She had practiced. Humanity requests a speaking slot on the matter of the Viridian Corridor transit fees. We have prepared a brief analysis and would welcome the opportunity to. The Krell ambassador stood up. His name was Vrethkos-san. He was 9 feet tall, broad through the shoulders, with skin the color of wet clay and 4 arms that ended in hands with too many joints. He wore the black and red sash of the Krell Dominion's military caste. He had been the Krell ambassador to the Council for 11 years, and in those 11 years he had interrupted human speakers 9 times, talked over human proposals 14 times, and once, during a trade negotiation, referred to the human delegation as the help. The Council had laughed. The humans had smiled. Ambassador Vasquez had written a note afterward that said, "We will not dignify it with a response." And they had not. They never did. Vreth Kosan did not wait for Sarah to finish. He stepped out of the Krell delegation's seating area, which was Tier 12, close to the floor, and he walked toward the podium with the heavy, unhurried gait of a creature that had never once in its life considered that it might need to hurry for anyone. "The human speaks," he said. His voice was loud. It filled the chamber without effort. He was not addressing Sarah. He was addressing the room. "The human speaks, and we are meant to listen. Is that the arrangement now?" Sarah stopped talking. Her hands tightened on the podium. She looked at the Krell ambassador, and she looked at the council president, a tall, thin being called Oravane of the Tess, who sat in the highest seat beneath the dome. Oravane's expression was unreadable, as it always was. Oravane did not intervene. Oravane never intervened. "I am only requesting a speaking slot," Sarah said. She kept her voice level. She kept the smile. Her grandmother's armor. "As is our right under Article?" "You're right." Kosan said the word like he was tasting something unpleasant. He was closer now. 5 steps from the podium. 4. "You have been in this chamber for 40 years, and in 40 years you have contributed nothing of value. No territory of note. No military significance. No cultural achievement worth preserving. You sit in the back. You bring your small cakes to the committee tables. You say please and thank you and you bow, and you have convinced yourselves that this makes you members of this body." He was 2 steps from the podium now. Sarah could smell him. Ozone and iron. "You are not members. You are pets. And pets do not get to speak." The chamber was quiet now. The murmuring had stopped. 900 species were watching. Sarah looked at the tiers, searching for something. A delegate standing. A voice raised in objection. A procedural ruling from the president's seat. Nothing. The Drathan were watching with mild interest. The Theshan pods bubbled softly. The Velnari sat rigid and still. Sarah looked at Tier 47. The human delegation. 43 men and women in navy blue uniforms. Ambassador Vasquez sat in the front row, her gray hair pulled back, her face very still. She did not look angry. She looked attentive. She was watching Sarah the way a surgeon watches a monitor. Waiting. Sarah turned back to Kosan. "Ambassador Kosan, I understand your frustration, but I must insist." "You must insist." Kosan repeated it. He smiled. It was not a nice smile. "You must insist." He reached the podium. He was very tall. Sarah had to tilt her head back to look at his face. He looked down at her with something that was not quite contempt. It was worse than contempt. Contempt required acknowledging the other person as a thing worth looking down on. This was indifference. The look you gave something you were about to step on without thinking. The Krell Dominion has filed a formal objection to humanity's continued occupancy of council seating, Kosan said. He said this to the room, not to Sarah. We move that the human delegation be reclassified from sovereign member to non-sentient observer. The motion is seconded by the Drathan coalition. A murmur. Sarah heard it. She heard the Drathan delegation's grinding vocalizations shift in pitch, which meant affirmation. She heard the quiet shuffle of the Velnari adjusting their spines. She heard nothing from the president's seat. That motion requires a 2/3 vote and a 30-day review period, Sarah said. She was still smiling. She could not stop smiling. Her face had locked. Her grandmother's armor had fused to her skin. Under council procedural rule, Kosan hit her. It was not a dramatic blow. He did not wind up. He did not raise his fist high. He simply backhanded her across the face with the upper left of his 4 hands, a casual, almost absent gesture, the way you might swat an insect from your sleeve. The sound was sharp and flat in the quiet chamber. Sarah's head snapped sideways. Her silver pin caught the light. She stumbled but did not fall. She caught herself on the podium. Blood appeared at the corner of her mouth. The chamber did not react. This was the thing Sarah would remember in the half-second she had left. Not the pain. Not the shock. The absence of reaction. 900 species. Not one sound. Not one delegate rising. Not one procedural objection. They watched. They watched the way you watched something on a screen, something that was happening to someone else, something that would be over soon and then you would go to lunch. Kosan looked at her. She looked up at him. Blood on her teeth. She was still smiling. She could not stop. You will not speak, Kosan said. He drew the sidearm from his sash. It was a Krell military pistol, a heavy, ugly thing that fired a bolt of focused plasma at close range. He held it at his side. He pointed it at Sarah's chest. He did this in front of 900 species. He did this on the floor of the Galactic Council. He did this while the president of the council watched from the highest seat and did nothing. This is a disciplinary demonstration, Kosan said. His voice was calm. Administrative. The pet has nipped. The pet will be corrected. Sarah Okafor looked at the pistol. She looked at Kosan. She looked up at the tiers, at the 900 faces. She looked at tier 47, at the woman with the gray hair. She stopped smiling. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not to Kosan. To the woman in tier 47. I'm sorry, I couldn't finish the sentence. Kosan pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt took Sarah Okafor in the center of her chest. She folded. She hit the blackstone floor. Her silver pin skittered away from her and spun to a stop near the base of the podium. She did not move. She did not make a sound after the first second. The chamber smelled of ozone and burnt fabric. Vreth Kosan holstered his weapon. He straightened his sash. He looked at the body on the floor with the same expression he might have given a stain on his boot. Then he turned to the chamber and said, "The Krell Dominion withdraws its motion. It seems unnecessary. The matter is resolved." He walked back to his seat. Tier 12. He sat down. He crossed his upper arms over his lower arms. He waited for the session to resume. The chamber was silent. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Sarah Okafor's body lay on the black stone. The silver pin gleamed. The plasma scorch on her uniform smoked faintly. No one moved. No one spoke. The council president, Oravane of the Tess, sat in the highest seat with long fingers folded beneath their chin, and their expression did not change. Then the stillness moved. It started in Tier 47. The human delegation. 43 people in navy blue. They did not stand. They did not shout. They did not surge forward or raise fists or cry out. They went still. Not the stillness of shock. Not the stillness of grief. This was something else. This was the stillness of a machine when the operator flips a switch and every moving part locks simultaneously. 43 people stopped breathing at the same time. 43 pairs of eyes fixed on the body on the floor. 43 faces drained of expression so completely and so fast that it looked like a wave passing through them, a tide going out, leaving nothing behind but flat, wet sand. The delegate next to Vasquez, a broad man named Torres, had been reaching for his comm unit. His hand stopped halfway. He did not complete the motion. He set his hand back on his knee. He stared at the floor. His jaw worked once. Then it stopped. In Tier 47, Row 3, a young man named Eli Park, who had been Sarah's friend, who had helped her rehearse her opening line the night before in the delegation's small kitchen over 2 cups of bad coffee, pressed his lips together. His eyes were dry. His face was blank. He looked like a photograph of himself. He did not blink. The stillness spread. It moved down from Tier 47 to the human support staff in the auxiliary galleries above. The aides. The analysts. The logistics coordinators. The people who made the coffee and filed the reports and ironed the uniforms. They went still too. A woman in the gallery who had been typing on a datapad set it down on her lap. She did not turn it off. She did not pick it back up. She sat with her hands in her lap and looked at the floor of the chamber. It spread further. To the human diplomatic vessels docked in the council station's harbor. To the human freighters in the outer ring. To the human research outpost on the station's lower levels. Every human on the station felt it. Not through any communication. Not through any signal. Through something older than technology. The thing that happens when a pack loses one of its own and every other member of the pack feels the absence like a change in air pressure. A door closing in a room you didn't know was there. The stillness lasted 11 seconds. Then Director Vasquez stood up. She stood slowly. She was 63 years old. She had been the head of Humanities Council delegation for 19 years. Her hair was gray, cut short, practical. Her uniform was the same navy blue as everyone else's, but she wore no pin. She had given hers to Sarah that morning. "You wear it today," she had said. "You earned it." Vasquez stood. She looked down at the floor of the chamber. At the body. At the scorch mark. At the small silver pin lying in the shadow of the podium. She looked at it for a long time. The chamber watched her. 900 species watched the gray-haired human woman stand in her seat in Tier 47 and look at the floor. Kosan watched from Tier 12. He looked bored. Vasquez reached up and touched her ear. Her comm unit. She pressed it once. She spoke. Her voice was quiet. It was picked up by the delegation's internal channel only. Not the council's broadcast feed. Not the public address system. Just the human channel. The one that connected every human on the station, every human ship in the sector, every human installation within communication range. She said 7 words. Protocol 9. All of them. Every leash is off. She released the comm. She reached into her breast pocket. She pulled out a small object. It was Sarah's backup credentials pin. The spare. The one Sarah had left in Vasquez's office that morning because she was afraid of losing it. Vasquez held it between her thumb and forefinger. She looked at it. She set it gently on the armrest of her seat. Then she stepped out of her row. She walked down the stairs from Tier 47. 1 flight. 2. 3. Her shoes made the same soft sounds on the stone that Sarah's had made. The chamber watched her descend. No one stopped her. No one asked her where she was going. She walked down to the floor. She walked to the podium. She walked past the podium. She walked to the body. She knelt. She closed Sarah's eyes with 2 fingers. She touched the girl's cheek, briefly, the way you touch something you are saying goodbye to. Then she stood. She did not look at the body again. She turned to face the chamber. She looked at Vrethko-san. She smiled. It was a smile. Technically. The corners of her mouth went up. Her teeth showed. But there was nothing behind it. No warmth. No performance. No grandmother's armor. It was a smile the way a scar is a line. A mark where something used to be. Ambassador Kosan, she said. Her voice was level. Calm. The same voice she had used for 19 years to say thank you for your time and we appreciate your consideration and of course, we're happy to accommodate. But the words were different now. You killed my colleague. You killed her on this floor, in front of this body, and you called her a pet, and you put her down. And you sat back down. And you waited for the session to resume. Kosan looked at her. The matter is resolved, he said. I suggest you return to your seat, Director. The session will continue. Vasquez tilted her head. The smile stayed. Yes, she said. It will. She turned to the chamber. To the 900 tiers. To the president in the highest seat. Madam President, Vasquez said. Oravane of the TES regarded her from above. Humanity requests a speaking slot. Oravane's thin fingers shifted beneath their chin. The request is noted. The floor recognizes the human delegation. Vasquez walked to the podium. She stood behind it. She placed her hands on its edges. The ironwood was still warm from Sarah's hands. Vasquez did not look down at the scorch mark on the stone. She looked up. Thank you, she said. And then, without pause, without breath, without any of the small courtesies that had filled human speech in this chamber for 40 years, she said, I am going to tell you what happens next. And then I am going to do it. What happened next took 11 minutes. The Council's official record would later note this. 11 minutes from the moment Director Vasquez took the podium to the moment the last human vessel in the sector completed its reflag. 11 minutes in which the Galactic Council watched, in real time, on live broadcast to 900 species and their home worlds, as humanity's polite mode shut down. It happened in layers. Minute 1, the language changed. Vasquez spoke. She did not shout. She did not pound the podium. She spoke in the same measured, even tone she had used for 19 years. But the words were different. The please was gone. The thank you was gone. The if it wouldn't be too much trouble was gone. The hedging, the softening, the careful padding of every sentence with cushions of deference, all of it was gone. What was left was plain. Direct. Flat. For 40 years, Vasquez said, humanity has spoken in this chamber in a register that is not our own. We have added apologies to sentences that did not require them. We have turned statements into questions. We have asked permission to exist in spaces we had every right to occupy. We did this because we were told it was appropriate. We did this because we were new and small, and we wanted to be good guests. She paused. We are done being guests. The chamber murmured. The Drathan delegation shifted. The Velnari remained still. Kosan, in Tier 12, uncrossed his arms. He was watching Vasquez with something that was not quite attention. Not yet. You have called us meek, Vasquez said. You have called us gentle. You have published papers on our submissive vocalization patterns. You have built policy around the assumption that humanity is a low-aggression species, a soft species, a species that will absorb any indignity because we are too polite to object. She let the word hang. Polite. We were not polite because we are weak. We were polite because we chose to be. And you mistook the choice for the nature of the thing. You looked at the leash and assumed there was no dog. Minute 2, the body language changed. In the tiers, the human delegation shifted. Not dramatically. Not with any sudden, theatrical movement. But the change was visible. Spines straightened. Shoulders dropped from the hunched, minimizing posture they had held for decades, the posture of people trying to take up less space, trying not to be seen, trying not to be in the way. They sat up. They occupied their seats fully. Hands that had been clasped in laps or folded on desks unclasped and rested on armrests, open, relaxed, present. Torres, the broad man beside Vasquez's empty seat, leaned back. He put his arm along the back of his chair. He looked at the chamber with an expression that was not hostile. It was worse. It was comfortable. The look of a man in his own house who has just heard a stranger break a window. In the auxiliary galleries, the support staff changed too. The woman with the datapad picked it up. She began typing. Not notes. Not minutes. Something else. Her fingers moved fast. Around her, other humans were doing the same. Pulling up files. Opening channels. Making calls. Quietly. Efficiently. Without asking anyone's permission. Minute 3, Vasquez stopped asking. She had been at the podium for 3 minutes, and in those 3 minutes she had not once said I request or I propose or would the council consider. She said we will. She said this is what will happen. She said you will listen. The grammar of the human address had shifted from petition to declaration. The council's procedural AI, which monitored all floor speeches for compliance with parliamentary language, flagged 17 violations in 3 minutes. It had flagged 4 in the previous 19 years combined. Vasquez looked at the flag scrolling on her podium display. She turned the display off. Minute 4, the Krell ambassador objected. This is irregular, Kosan said from Tier 12. His voice was loud. It had been loud enough to fill the chamber when he spoke before. Now it sounded smaller. Not because the chamber had changed. Because the humans in it had changed, and the space they filled was different. The director is in violation of council speech protocols. I move that she be. Denied, Vasquez said. She did not look at him. She was looking at the president's seat. Madam President, the Krell ambassador wishes to make a procedural motion. I am asking you to deny it. Oravane of the Tess regarded her. On what grounds? On the grounds that he killed a member of my delegation on this floor 4 minutes ago, and I would prefer not to hear his voice until I have finished speaking. The chamber was very quiet. The Theshan pods had stopped bubbling. The Drathan had stopped grinding. Even the ambient hum of the station's systems seemed to lower. Oravane was silent for a long moment. Then, the motion is denied. The floor remains with the human delegation. Cosson's 4 hands tightened on his armrest. He did not speak again. Minute 5, Vasquez told them what humanity had done. Not what humanity would do. What humanity had already done. For 40 years. Quietly. While smiling. While bowing. While bringing baked goods to committee meetings. While you were debating whether we were sentient enough to hold a seat in this chamber, Vasquez said, we mapped every gravity well, every radiation pocket, every unstable corridor in a 12,000 light-year radius of this station. We did this because you hadn't. We did this because someone had to. We filed the data under miscellaneous surveys so no one would feel embarrassed that they hadn't done it first. She paused. When the Theshan breeding colonies on Vale 4 were threatened by the Koroth blight 9 years ago, we sent a medical team. You remember this. You sent us a thank you note. What you do not remember is that our team was there in 4 hours. Your nearest medical asset was 9 days out. We told you it was a coincidence of scheduling. It was not. We had a ship parked 3 systems away because we had been watching the Koroth spore drift for 6 months and we knew it was coming. We did not tell you because we did not want you to feel that you owed us. She looked at the Theshan pods. The liquid inside them was very still. When the Velnari border dispute with the Drathan nearly went kinetic 3 years ago, we quietly moved a humanitarian fleet to the contested zone. Not a war fleet. A humanitarian fleet. Hospital ships. Supply ships. The kind of ships you don't look at twice. They were there for 6 weeks. If the shooting had started, they would have been there to pick up the pieces. The shooting didn't start. You congratulated yourselves on the diplomatic resolution. We were happy for you. She looked at the Velnari. Their flat eyes watched her. Their spines were very straight. We did all of this, Vasquez said, while you called us pets. Minute 6, the smile dropped. It was a small thing. Vasquez had been smiling since she knelt beside Sarah's body. The empty smile. The scar smile. The smile that was not a smile. At the 6-minute mark, it went away. Not into anger. Not into grief. Into nothing. Her face settled into a flat, neutral expression that was somehow more terrifying than any snarl. It was the face of a person who had finished feeling things and was now operating on procedure. She reached into her uniform pocket. She pulled out a small device. A comm unit. Older model. Manual frequency. She set it on the podium. I am going to make a call, she said. You will hear it. I am not asking permission. She activated the device. A voice came through. Male. Comm. Background noise that sounded like a ship's engine room. Vasquez. Go ahead. Manners, this is Director Vasquez. Authorization code 9900 Okafor. Confirm. A pause. The voice said, confirmed. What's the scope? All of them. Another pause. Longer. The background noise in the engine room seemed to shift, as if someone had set down a tool. All of them. Director, that's All of them, manners. Every leash. Every lock. Every restraint protocol from here to the outer reach. Shut them down. All of them. No. The voice was quiet for a moment. Then, understood. Executing. The calm went dead. Vasquez set the device down. She looked at the chamber. You just heard me speak to our military coordination AI. You know it as manners. You know it because we told you about it in our first year in the council as a gesture of transparency. We told you it managed our defensive assets. We told you it operated under strict restraint protocols. We told you it would never authorize offensive action without a unanimous vote of the Human Security Council. She paused. What we did not tell you is that manners is not a weapons system. Manners is a lock. It does not control our weapons. It controls our restraint. Every human military vessel, every weapons platform, every strategic asset we have spent 40 years building in the dark between the stars has been locked behind a manners protocol. Not locked to prevent use. Locked to prevent us from using them. Manners exists because we knew what we would do if someone hurt us. We knew, and we were afraid of ourselves, so we built a machine to hold the door shut. She looked at the chamber. 900 species. Silent. Watching. I just told the machine to open the door. Minute 7, the tactical displays changed. It started in the Council's Strategic Operations Center, 3 levels below the chamber. The officers there, multi-species, career professionals, people who monitored the sector's military balance for a living, were watching their displays when the data shifted. The human fleet in the sector was listed in the Council's registry as a modest force. 14 cargo vessels. 6 survey craft. 3 diplomatic transports. 1 hospital ship. 24 vessels in total. A rounding error. A footnote. The kind of fleet a minor species kept for logistics and goodwill missions. The registry updated. The 14 cargo vessels reflagged. Their transponder codes changed. Their tonnage readings doubled, then tripled. The survey craft shed their scientific instrumentation profiles and registered heavy weapons arrays. The diplomatic transports resolved into command and control platforms. The hospital ship remained a hospital ship. It was, apparently, genuinely a hospital ship. 24 vessels became 200. 200 became 1,000. 1,000 became 14,000. The numbers climbed on the tactical displays like a fever. 14,000 human warships, sitting in the dark between stars, in orbits no one had checked, behind moons no one had bothered to scan, in the blind spots of every sensor network the Council operated. 14,000 ships, waiting. Patient. Polite. Locked. Until now. In the operations center, a Velnari officer stared at her display. She looked at the numbers. She looked at them again. She picked up her comm and called the chamber. Madam President. We have a situation. Minute 8, the chamber saw the feed. Oravane authorized the tactical display to be projected onto the chamber's dome. The star charts that had been painted there since the Council's founding were replaced by a live strategic overlay. The Council looked up. They saw the sector map. They saw the human fleet. 14,000 icons, red-gold, spreading through the void in a geometric pattern that was too precise, too symmetrical, to be anything other than a pre-planned formation. A formation that had been rehearsed. A formation that had been waiting. The chamber made a sound. Not a gasp. Not a cry. A low, collective exhalation. The sound of 900 species realizing, at the same time, that they had misread the room. That the quiet creature in the corner was not quiet because it was small. It was quiet because it was choosing to be. Kosan stood up in Tier 12. He looked at the dome. He looked at the 14,000 icons. His 4 hands were flat on the railing in front of him. For the first time since he had walked to the podium, since he had backhanded a 26-year-old woman and put a plasma bolt through her chest, Vreth Kosan looked uncertain. "This is a bluff," he said. His voice was not loud. It did not fill the chamber. The humans do not have 14,000 warships. They do not have the industrial base. They do not have the... Ambassador Kosan, Vasquez said. She was still at the podium. She had not raised her voice. She had not moved. She stood with her hands on the ironwood and her flat, empty face pointed at the Krell delegation, and she spoke in the same tone she had used for 19 years to say thank you for your time. "I would strongly encourage you to stop talking." Kosan stopped talking. Minute 9, Vasquez gave the countdown. She told them what would happen. She told them in calm, clinical detail, the way a doctor tells you the results of a test. No drama. No anger. Just information. The human fleet is currently holding position. It will hold position for 1 hour. During that hour, the Krell Dominion will recall its ambassador from this chamber. The Krell Dominion will issue a formal, public apology for the murder of Sarah Okafor. The Krell Dominion will submit to a full council tribunal on the matter of its conduct toward the human delegation over the past 40 years. The Krell Dominion will pay reparations to the Okafor family in an amount to be determined by this body. She paused. If these conditions are not met within the hour, the human fleet will move. It will move to the Krell home system. It will not fire. It will not bombard. It will not invade. It will simply arrive. 14,000 ships in orbit over Krell Prime. And it will sit there. And it will wait. And every Krell citizen will look up at their sky and see what 40 years of politeness looked like from the other side. The chamber was silent. "That is the minimum," Vasquez said. "That is us being restrained. That is us giving you the hour. That is us saying please one last time. I want you to understand that. This is the polite version. This is the version where we ask. The next version does not ask." Minute 10, the president spoke. Oravane of the Tess leaned forward in the highest seat. Their long fingers unfolded. They looked down at the chamber. At the body on the floor, which no one had moved. At the silver pin. At the gray-haired woman at the podium. At the 14,000 icons burning on the dome. "The Council acknowledges the human delegation's statement," Oravane said. Their voice was thin, reedy, ancient. "The Council will deliberate on the proposed conditions. The session is suspended for 1 hour." Vasquez nodded. "Thank you, Madam President." The old courtesy. Automatic. Reflexive. She said it before she could stop herself. She heard herself say it. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, the courtesy was gone from her face. "I would also like to note," Vasquez said, "that the body of Sarah Okafor will be returned to her family in Lagos, Earth, for burial. The Council will provide transport. This is not a request." She stepped back from the podium. She walked across the black stone floor. She paused at the body. She picked up the silver pin. She put it in her pocket. She walked to the stairs. She climbed back to Tier 47. She sat down. The delegation closed around her. 43 people in navy blue. Silent. Upright. Present. The chamber watched them sit. No one moved. No one spoke. The session was suspended, but no one left. They sat in their tiers and they watched the humans, and they waited, and the 14,000 icons burned overhead. Minute 11, the last layer. It was a small thing. The last layer. The last piece of the polite mode to fall away. It happened in the auxiliary gallery, in the row of human support staff. Eli Park, the young man who had helped Sarah rehearse, who had been her friend, who had not blinked in 11 minutes, stood up. He walked to the railing. He looked down at the floor of the chamber. At the scorch mark on the black stone where Sarah Okafor had died. He took a breath. He let it out. He pulled out his comm unit. He dialed a number. Earth. Lagos. A residential line. A woman's voice answered. Older. Warm. Confused by the unfamiliar caller ID. Hello? Who is this? Eli Park looked at the scorch mark. He opened his mouth. He was going to say I'm sorry. He was going to say I'm so sorry, ma'am, I'm sorry, we couldn't stop it, I'm sorry. He was going to wrap the worst news a mother could receive in cotton and softness and please forgive us. He closed his mouth. He opened it again. Mrs. Okafor, he said. His voice was flat. Clear. No padding. No cushion. My name is Eli Park. I was Sarah's friend. I was with her today. She was killed this morning in the council chamber. She was brave. She was speaking when it happened. She did not back down. I wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it from the news. I'm sorry. He paused. No. I'm not sorry. I'm angry. And I wanted you to know that. He ended the call. He put the comm away. He sat back down. He did not blink. The 11 minutes were over. The Krell Dominion surrendered in 9 hours. It was not a dramatic surrender. There was no battle. No exchange of fire. No desperate last stand. The human fleet moved. 14,000 ships, in geometric formation, folding through the void in a pattern that the Council's strategic analysts would later describe in classified reports as mathematically inevitable. They did not accelerate. They did not broadcast threats. They did not open targeting solutions. They simply moved, in perfect silence, toward the Krell home system, and the movement was enough. The Krell Dominion had a military fleet. It was large by galactic standards. 3,000 warships, battle-tested, crewed by the Dominion's warrior caste. It formed up to meet the human advance. It broadcast challenges. It demanded parley. It invoked ancient rites of combat. The human fleet did not respond. It did not slow down. It did not change course. It continued its approach at a steady, unhurried pace, like a tide. Like something that had been coming for a very long time and was not going to be rushed. At the 4-hour mark, the Krell fleet's formation began to waver. Ships drifted. Communications between Krell vessels became erratic. The warrior caste commanders argued. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to run. Some wanted to open channels and talk, to explain, to negotiate, to use the words they had spent 40 years denying to the humans. At the 6-hour mark, the Krell High Command recalled the fleet. All 3,000 ships. They pulled back to Krell Prime's orbit and powered down their weapons arrays. The gesture was unprecedented. The Krell Dominion had not powered down its weapons in peacetime in 300 years. At the 8-hour mark, Vreth Kosan was arrested. Not by the Council. Not by human security forces. By his own delegation. The junior Krell diplomats in Tier 12 stood up, crossed the chamber floor, and placed their hands on his shoulders. They removed his sash. They removed his sidearm. They walked him to the chamber's security office. He went quietly. He did not speak. His 4 hands hung at his sides. At the 9-hour mark, the Krell Dominion's ruling council transmitted a formal surrender to the Galactic Council. Unconditional. No conditions. No negotiations. The text was 3 sentences long. It acknowledged the murder of Sarah Okafor. It acknowledged 40 years of systematic mistreatment of the human delegation. It submitted the Dominion to the Council's jurisdiction for all matters arising from both. The Council accepted the surrender. The session resumed. The conditions Vasquez had stated were adopted in full, unanimously, without debate. The tribunal was scheduled. The reparations were set. The apology was drafted, reviewed, and broadcast to every member species. The human fleet held position for 1 more hour after the surrender. Then, one by one, the 14,000 ships powered down their drives. They did not leave. They stayed in formation. They stayed in the dark between the stars. But they powered down. The locks went back on. Manners resumed its watch. The door closed. Not because the threat was gone. Because Vasquez told it to. The next morning, the council session resumed. The chamber was different. The body had been removed. The scorch mark on the black stone had been cleaned, but the stone was discolored, a faint shadow in the shape of a woman, and no one had the heart to order it resurfaced. The silver pin was gone. Vasquez had it in her pocket. The tiers were full. 912 species. Every delegate present. No absences. No one had called in sick. No one had filed a scheduling conflict. They were all there, in their seats, watching the stairs. At 0900 station time, the human delegation entered. 43 people in navy blue. They walked in single file. They did not look at the floor. They did not look at the tiers. They walked to tier 47. They sat. They placed their hands on their desks. They waited. Vasquez was not among them. The chamber murmured. The Drathan ground their vocalizations in low, uneasy frequencies. The Theshan pods bubbled. The Velnari sat rigid. At 0904, Vasquez entered. She walked alone. She wore the same navy blue uniform. Her gray hair was pulled back. She walked down the stairs. 1 flight. 2. 3. She walked to the floor. She walked to the podium. She stopped. She looked down at the stone. At the faint shadow. She stood there for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket. She took out the silver pin. Sarah's pin. The one Sarah had worn. The one that had skittered across the stone when she fell. Vasquez pinned it to her own breast. Left side. Over her heart. She looked up. She placed her hands on the podium. The ironwood was warm. It was always warm. "Madam President," she said. Her voice was level. Calm. The same voice. Humanity requests a speaking slot. Oravane of the Tess looked down from the highest seat. They looked at Vasquez. They looked at the pin. They looked at the shadow on the stone. The floor recognizes the human delegation, Oravane said. Vasquez nodded. She looked at the chamber. 900 tiers. 900 species. The Krell delegation was present. A new ambassador. Younger. Smaller. She sat very still in Tier 12 and did not meet Vasquez's eyes. Vasquez looked at the new Krell ambassador. She looked at the Drathan. She looked at the Velnari. She looked at the Theshan pods. She looked at every tier, every face, every delegate who had sat in silence while a 9-foot soldier backhanded a 26-year-old woman and put a plasma bolt through her chest. She looked at all of them. And then she smiled. It was not the empty smile. Not the scar smile. Not the smile with nothing behind it. It was a real smile. Small. Tired. Warm at the edges. Her grandmother's armor, put back on. But it fit differently now. It was not armor anymore. It was a choice. A deliberate, conscious, revocable choice. She was choosing to smile. She was choosing to be polite. And everyone in the chamber knew that. Everyone in the chamber knew that the choice could be unmade. That the leash was in her hand, and her hand only, and that the door was closed but not locked, and that the machine called Manners was watching, and waiting, and holding its breath. She smiled. And 900 species flinched. Now, Vasquez said. We'd like our speaking slot, please. She paused. On the matter of the Viridian Corridor transit fees. We have prepared a brief analysis. We would welcome the opportunity to present it. The same words? Sarah's words? The ones Sarah had rehearsed 43 times in a preparation alcove behind the chamber floor. The words Sarah had never finished saying. Vasquez said them now. She said them softly, carefully, with the weight of a eulogy underneath them. The chamber was silent. Then, slowly, the council president nodded. Proceed, Director. Vasquez opened her folder. She began to speak. About transit fees. About tariff structures. About the Viridian Corridor and its shipping lanes and the economic impact of fee adjustments on mid-tier member species. Dry. Technical. Boring. The kind of speech that made delegates check their comm units and think about lunch. She spoke for 12 minutes. No one interrupted. No one checked their comm, no one thought about lunch. 900 species sat in absolute silence and listened to a gray-haired woman talk about transit fees, and they listened the way you listen to a person holding a lit match over a pool of gasoline, waiting to see if they're going to drop it. Vasquez finished. She closed her folder. She looked at the chamber. Thank you for your time, she said. She walked back to the stairs. She climbed to Tier 47. She sat down. The delegation closed around her. 43 people in navy blue. They opened their folders. They began taking notes. They whispered among themselves. They were polite. They were quiet. They were normal. And that was the most terrifying part. That they went back. That they sat in their seats in Tier 47, near the back, and they opened their folders, and they talked about transit fees, and they were polite. After everything. After the stillness. After Protocol 9. After 14,000 ships and a 9-hour surrender and a scorch mark on the black stone. They went back to being polite. But it was different now. Everyone knew. Everyone had seen the 11 minutes. Everyone had heard the voice underneath the voice, the words underneath the words, the thing that lived behind the please and the thank you and the if it wouldn't be too much trouble. They had seen the lock. They had seen the door. They had seen what was behind it. And they had seen Vasquez close the door and walk back to the podium and say please. And they understood, maybe for the first time, that the please was not a weakness. It was a mercy. It was the sound of a species choosing, every single day, not to be what it could be. Choosing to be small. Choosing to be soft. Choosing to bring baked goods and yield the floor and laugh at jokes that weren't funny. Choosing. The session continued. Other delegates spoke. The Drathan raised a motion on mining rights. The Theshan proposed a cultural exchange. The Velnari filed a procedural objection. Normal business. The machinery of 900 species grinding along. In Tier 47, Torres leaned over to Vasquez. He whispered, "You okay?" Vasquez touched the pin on her breast. She was quiet for a moment. She practiced it 43 times, Vasquez said. The opening line. She told me. 43 times. She wanted to get it right. Torres nodded. He didn't say anything. Vasquez opened her folder. She looked at the transit fee analysis. She looked at the numbers. She read a line. She read it again. She set the folder down. "We'll present the revised figures on Thursday," she said. Her voice was steady. Normal. Polite. She picked up her folder. She put on her reading glasses. She leaned back in her chair. The scorch mark on the black stone caught the light from the dome. Faint. Almost invisible. A shadow in the shape of a woman who had stood at the podium and said distinguished delegates and meant it. Who had smiled because her grandmother taught her to. Who had died mid-sentence because a large man decided she was a pet. The shadow stayed. No one cleaned it. No one resurfaced the stone. It was still there, years later, when humanity finally moved out of Tier 47. Not because they asked. Not because they demanded. Because the Council voted, unanimously, to move them. To the front. To Tier 1. Beside the Velnari and the Drathan and the old powers. Vasquez was not there for the move. She had retired. She lived on a small station near Earth. She grew tomatoes. She did not watch the Council feeds. But Eli Park was there. He was the delegation lead now. He walked down from Tier 47 for the last time. He walked to Tier 1. He sat down. He opened his folder. He looked at the podium. The ironwood. Warm. He looked at the stone. The shadow. He touched his comm. He dialed a number. Earth. Lagos. A residential line. A woman's voice answered. Older. Warm. Tired in a way that never went away. Hello. Mrs. Okafor, Eli said. It's Eli. I just wanted you to know. We moved seats today. We're in the front now. A pause. A long one. She would have liked that, Mrs. Okafor said. Yes, ma'am, Eli said. She would have. He ended the call. He put the comm away. He opened his folder. The session continued. The shadow stayed. The end.